Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're diving straight into the editorial section today. First up, a really crucial look at the role of primary health center doctors, the PHC doctors across India. They're foundational but under increasing strain.
Absolutely. And there's so much more than just clinicians treating illnesses. They're planners, coordinators, community leaders in many ways.
Right, sort of bridging the gap between what the community needs on the ground and what the policy aims for.
Exactly. And the scale is huge. A typical PHC might cover around 30,000 people.
30,000?
Yeah, though it varies. Maybe 20,000 in hilly or tribal areas, or it could jump to 50,000 in urban settings.
Wow. So that's a massive responsibility for often just one or two doctors.
It really is. They're responsible for the total care of that entire population, with often quite limited resources.
And the workload, when you break it down, it's pretty intense. The article mentions the clinical side for seeing maybe up to 100 outpatients every single day.
100 a day, yes. And think about the range: newborns, elderly patients, infectious diseases, accidents, chronic conditions, mental health.
Basically, the entire spectrum of medicine. It sounds like a constant race against time just to see everyone.
It often is. But that clinical load, heavy as it is really only half the story. The non-clinical duties are just relentless.
Okay, like what sort of things?
Well, coordinating huge immunization drives, managing efforts to control diseases spread by insects, doing door-to-door health surveys.
Door to door, on top of the clinic work.
And running school health checks under the RBSK program, mentoring the local health workers, the ASHAs and A&Ms, and they have to show up for local government meetings, the Gram Sabhas. It's endless.
And then there's what the source calls the invisible burden, the admin work. This sounds pretty overwhelming.
It's staggering. They have to maintain over 100 physical logbooks or registers for everything: medicine stocks, maternal health tracking, disease surveillance.
100 separate physical registers.
Yes, and at the same time, they need to enter basically the same data into multiple different digital platforms: IFE-PHR, HHMIS, now UWINE for immunizations.
So, wait, they're recording the same information twice, once on paper, once digitally.
That's exactly it. The very systems meant to streamline things have actually created this huge duplication of effort. Doctors are spending hours, often late at night, just doing data entry.
That sounds like a recipe for burnout.
It absolutely is. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, now actually recognizes burnout in its ICD-11 classification as a genuine occupational phenomenon. It's not just feeling tired, it's a systemic issue.
So it stems from this gap between the high expectations we place on them and the sort of lack of real support staffing, tools, maybe even compensation.
Precisely. The whole system needs to shift. We need to move away from this culture of just adding more compliance tasks, more forms, more registers, and toward actually facilitating their work.
Like through automation or maybe better delegation of the admin tasks.
Exactly. Because strong PHEs aren't just a nice to have. They are absolutely essential if we're serious about achieving universal health coverage and the Sustainable Development Goal for health.
So until we treat these doctors less like clerks and more like the clinicians and leaders they need to be, those big goals might stay out of reach.
That's the core message, yes. It's a systemic failure needing urgent attention.
Okay, a really important issue. Now let's pivot a bit. From that crisis in primary care to something different, the global expansion of traditional medicine, specifically Ayurveda.
Right, and it's a huge global trend. The WHO itself reports that traditional medicine is practiced in, 88% of member states? That's 170 countries.
Wow. And often it's the primary source of care for many people simply because it's accessible.
Absolutely. And there's serious money involved, too. The global market for traditional medicine is projected to hit almost $600 billion by 2025.
$583 billion, the source says. That's enormous. And India's AYUSH sector.
It's booming. It's grown nearly 8 times larger recently. We're talking about $1.54 billion in exports to over 150 countries. It's significant healthcare influence, soft power.
Is this mainly an export thing, or is it widely used within India, too?
Oh, very widely used. The National Sample Survey Office did a big survey in 2022-23. It found awareness is almost universal, 95–96% across rural and urban India.
And Ayurveda specifically.
Hugely popular. More than half the people who use AYUG systems prefer Ayurveda. especially for prevention, staying healthy, rejuvenation type thing.
And this isn't just happening organically. There's clear institutional backing, right? Lots of global outreach.
Definitely. Things like setting up 43 AYUSH information cells abroad, 15 academic chairs in universities overseas, plus a big push domestically on validating treatments clinically and standardizing the medicines.
And the capstone seems to be this WHO Global Center for Traditional Medicine based in India.
Yes, that's a major development. And the goal isn't just to promote traditional systems, it's to really integrate them with modern science,
Yeah.
using digital health tools, AI, big data analytics.
So applying rigorous modern methods to understand and standardize these ancient practices.
Exactly. To prove efficacy, ensure safety, and make them more accessible globally. It's about moving towards proactive, preventive healthcare.
Which fits well with Ayurveda's core ideas, doesn't it?
It does. The philosophy emphasizes balanced body and mind, but also humans and nature.
Yeah.
That makes it feel very relevant today, with challenges like lifestyle diseases and even the health impacts of climate change.
Hence the theme, Ayurveda for people and planet. It's positioning itself as a holistic approach for modern times.
Precisely. A system looking towards prevention and overall well-being.
Okay, let's shift now to the opinion section. This article tackles trans rights and dignity, and it makes a powerful point right at the start. Policy is like the scaffolding of our lives.
It's the structure that supports society. And for gender minorities, the absence of good supportive policy isn't just an inconvenience. The author argues it's a fundamental denial of dignity.
And that absence has real costs linked to basic survival, like finding food or shelter, which creates intense vulnerability.
Right. And the article points out this gap between, say, government promises like job quotas or welfare schemes and the reality on the ground.
How so?
Well, if accessing that quota involves facing humiliation, invasive questions, or just bureaucratic indifference, it's not really empowerment, is it? It can feel more like a trap.
The piece also details some grim daily realities, like searching for housing, becoming a labyrinth of prejudice.
Yes, where your application might just get thrown out because of who you are, or even just using public transport, going to the market.
Yeah.
The author says it takes heroic courage because of the constant risk of ridicule or harassment.
It draws a historical parallel, saying just like denying rights to women or other marginalized groups was a huge societal mistake.
Excluding gender minorities also means we lose out on incredible talent, potential scientists, artists, leaders who are silenced or pushed away because the basic structures of society don't make space for them.
The point being that resilience, while admirable, is no substitute for actual rights.
Exactly. And the crucial shift needed is to stop doing policy for these communities and start designing it with them. Representation has to be baked into the process.
So what are the concrete priorities for change mentioned?
The source highlights 3 urgent areas. First, education making school curricula inclusive and having strong anti-discrimination rules that are actually enforced.
Okay. Second.
Affordable, state-supported healthcare, including gender transition support and mental health services, recognizing that transitioning can be vital for survival and well-being.
1/3.
Real, enforceable anti-discrimination in jobs and housing. Not just on paper, but policies that actually result in people getting hired, getting apartments, getting property deeds, making inclusion translate into tangible economic stability.
So building that policy scaffolding requires including these communities in the actual architecture of justice.
That's the fundamental argument, yes.
Right. That brings us quite naturally maybe to the science section. We're looking at the future of computing, specifically tackling the limits of current electronics.
Yeah, our standard silicon chips are hitting walls in terms of speed and especially power consumption. AI models are getting so complex they need huge amounts of energy.
So the hope is optical computing, using light photons instead of electrons.
That's the idea. Light promises much higher speeds, more bandwidth, and potentially far greater energy efficiency. But calculating with light isn't straightforward.
Why not?
Well, normally light behaves predictably, what scientists call a linear response.
Yeah.
Double the input light, you get double the output. Simple. But for computation, you need complexity.
So how do they achieve that?
By pushing light into the nonlinear regime. This happens when you send really intense laser pulses through certain materials like special glass fibers. The light interacts strongly with the material, and the pulses can even interact with each other.
And this creates New effects.
Exactly. They interfere, they can generate completely new colors, new frequencies of light. It becomes a very complex dynamic process.
Hmm.
And that complex physics can be harnessed for computation.
Okay, so this research from Tampere University and Université Marie-Louis Pasteur used this nonlinear effect in fibers to do AI tasks.
That's right. They used a relatively simple type of neural network called an extreme learning machine, or ELM.
How did it work, practically speaking? Walk us through it.
Okay, so imagine you have input data, like a small image of a handwritten digit, say 10 by 10 pixels.
Mm-hmm.
You encode that data onto a short, intense pulse of laser light, maybe by changing its phase or amplitude in specific ways.
Okay, so the data's on the light pulse.
Then you send that pulse down the special optical fiber, operating in that high-intensity nonlinear way. As it travels, the fiber's properties, especially at something called dispersion, which affects how different colors travel at different speeds, interact with the nonlinearity to transform the pulse.
So the fiber itself is doing something to the data encoded on the light.
Precisely. It's scrambling and mixing the information in a complex but repeatable physical way. At the output end of the fiber, you don't just get the original pulse back. You measure the whole spectrum of light frequencies, all the colors that come out.
And that spectrum is the result.
That spectrum is the computation. It acts like a unique fingerprint of the input data, transformed by the journey through the fiber. This complex output spectrum serves as the hidden layer in their ELM model. It's where the intelligent processing happens, purely through the physics of light propagation.
Wow. So the physics is the calculation. What kind of results did they get?
Pretty impressive for this stage. The system achieved 91% to 93% accuracy in recognizing those handwritten digits, all done using the light physics, not conventional electronic circuits.
That's quite high accuracy.
It is. They also found something interesting. Making the light more intense, or using a longer fiber, helped accuracy, but only up to a point. Beyond that, the system became too chaotic, too unstable for reliable computation. There's a sweet spot.
So what's the big picture implication here?
It's a really important proof of principle. It shows how fundamental physics research, in this case nonlinear optics and fibers, can actually drive completely new ways of computing.
But we're not going to have optical laptops next year.
Oh, definitely not. Developing things like fully integrated photonic circuits or large-scale optical neural networks is a long-term project many years away. But this research clearly points towards a potential future of much faster, smarter, and far more energy-efficient AI.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, on to our final section, text and context. And we're back to more grounded but equally complex issues, starting with a trade dispute between the U.S. and India over corn.
Right. The U.S. wants India to import American corn, and it seems tightly linked to India's big push for ethanol blending in fuel.
India's own maize yield isn't super high, the article notes, below 4 tons per hectare.
Yeah.
But historically, we've been self-sufficient.
Largely, yes. And India is actually ramping up domestic maize production specifically for ethanol. They're expecting to use 10 to 12 million tons this season from Indian farms.
So what's the main sticking point with U.S. corn then?
The big one is that U.S. corn is overwhelmingly genetically modified GM. And India has, politically, put a freeze on allowing most GM food crops. Only GM cotton is permitted.
Due to public concerns.
Yes. Significant public and scientific concern about potential toxicity risks if GM ingredients enter the wider food chain for humans or animals. So there's a major regulatory and political barrier right there.
Okay, but why is the U.S. pushing so hard? What's their motivation?
Well, you have to understand U.S. agriculture. It's highly industrialized, capitalist, and produces massive surpluses. Their corn yields are often triple India's, grown on huge farms. They need export markets constantly to absorb all that production.
It's a structural need for them.
Absolutely. And corn and soybeans are huge cash crops, politically sensitive. The Corn Belt states, like Iowa, hold a lot of political sway, especially in presidential primaries.
So there's domestic political pressure in the U.S. to find buyers?
Immense pressure. And it's particularly high right now because China, which used to buy enormous amounts of U.S. soybeans, has cut back significantly. That's created a real crisis for farmers in the U.S. Midwest, so they're desperately looking for other markets, like India.
Okay, so what are the stakes for India if it did agree to import U.S. corn?
There are big risks. U.S. corn is often much cheaper, maybe only 70% of the price of Indian maize. Importing it risks dumping, flooding the market with cheap imports.
Which could hurt Indian farmers.
Exactly. It could completely undermine the efforts to build up a domestic maize supply chain for ethanol. You could see serious distress among Indian farmers, particularly in maize-growing areas like Bihar, which carries its own political risks for the government here.
And there's a bigger strategic point, too, isn't there, about the whole point of the ethanol program?
Absolutely critical point. The main goal of ethanol blending is import substitution, reducing India's reliance on imported oil, saving potentially billions of dollars, maybe up to $10 billion a year in foreign exchange.
So importing the feedstock for that ethanol.
Completely defeats the purpose. You'd just be swapping oil import costs for corn import costs. It undermines the entire economic and strategic rationale.
The article mentions Mexico as a warning.
Yes, a stark warning. After the NAFTA trade agreement, cheap U.S. corn flooded Mexico, and estimates suggest over 1 million Mexican farmers were driven out of business, unable to compete. It's a cautionary tale about the potential impact of such imports on domestic agriculture.
Right. A complex situation with major economic and political dimensions on both sides.
Definitely.
Okay, finally, let's end with something seemingly much simpler, but with some lovely physics hidden inside. Stamps and glue. That everyday act of licking a stamp. Why does it work so easily?
It's a great question, and it comes down to fundamental forces. We all feel gravity. That's our weight, maybe 600 newtons for a 60-kilogram person. But the force holding that tiny stamp to the envelope is electromagnetic.
Electromagnetic, but the stamp paper and the envelope paper aren't charged, are they? And the glue?
Well, the glue is mostly something called polyvinyl acetate, PVA. It's made of long chain molecules. You can picture them like tiny strands of spaghetti made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And overall, these molecules are electrically neutral.
So how do neutral things stick together? That seems counterintuitive.
It does. But here's the clever bit. It involves something called the van der Waals force. Even though a molecule is neutral overall, the electrons whizzing around inside it are constantly moving, fluctuating.
Okay.
So just for a fleeting instant, one part of the molecule might be slightly negative and another part slightly positive. It's a temporary imbalance, a fluctuation.
Right.
Now, if another neutral molecule is really close by, that temporary imbalance in the first molecule can actually distort the electron cloud in the second molecule, inducing an opposite temporary charge in it.
Ah, so they create tiny, fleeting attractions between each other, like temporary mini-magnets.
Exactly. That's the van der Waals force, but it's incredibly short range. The molecules have to be almost touching for it to be strong enough.
And that's where the water comes in when we talk about liquid glue?
Precisely. Liquid glue has water mixed in. The water molecules keep the long PVA spaghetti strands separated, kind of swim around, so they don't stick together prematurely in the bottle.
So when you spread the glue?
The water starts to evaporate. As the water leaves, the PVA molecules get forced closer and closer together, and also closer to the surfaces you're gluing. Suddenly, they're near enough to feel those van der Waals attractions strongly, and zap. They stick to each other and to the paper or cardboard.
Okay, so how does that apply to a dry stamp? The glue is already dry there.
Right, the stamp has a layer of dried PVA. When you moisten it, lick it, or dab it with water, you're adding just enough water to temporarily redissolve or separate those dried PVA molecules a little bit.
Just enough to let you position the stamp.
Exactly. It makes the surface tacky and repositionable for a moment. Then, as that small amount of water quickly evaporates or gets absorbed by the paper, the PVA molecules snap back together, the van der Waals forces re-engage, and the stamp is stuck fast.
It's quite elegant, really, just adding and removing water to switch the force on and off.
It is. And here's a final thought for you to ponder. Understanding why those electron clouds fluctuate in the first place, the very origin of that temporary charge imbalance that drives the van der Waals force, well, that actually takes you deep into the world of quantum mechanics.
So even licking a stamp connects back to fundamental physics, something to think about next time. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.